Very good. And so now we have actually two speakers from Info Team. I think Frank is going to be the lead. So this is going to be Frank Poignier and Roland Heinisch. And so they're going to be talking about AI as part of functionally safe system. And Frank, he covers the arena of functional safety within Info Team as the chief engineer and consultant. And he presents the software GmbH in national and international standardization committees. And in addition, he's also a chief engineer in customer projects. And Roland, he is a module manager for infrastructure, and he's really about team development and project management. And he has a long-standing experience, especially in safe systems in the energy technology. So thank you for joining us today, Frank, and we're looking forward to your talk.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, and I hope my talk is interesting because it's a little bit in a different direction than we're carrying up to now, because I'm challenging with, is it possible to use AI in systems with reference to functional safety? And why is this currently such an exciting topic? Among other things, autonomous systems such as autonomously driving ships, autonomously driving trains, and autonomously driving cars are currently being discussed. And these autonomous systems are built on the fact that the use of AI should be the right approach to solving problems. Why, and if this is truly the best approach, would be worth a separate discussion. Also, why, especially in areas such as driving a car, which is described and determined very precisely by a comprehensive set of rules, artificial intelligence is necessary. So apparently we all drive on the streets in such a way that a chauffeur, implemented strictly according to the road traffic regulations, is not a viable solution. But as I said, that would be worth a separate, certainly very exciting discussion. So for today, let's just stick to the fact that in order to operate these autonomous systems, it will be necessary to deal with the topic of standards of functional safety. So the motivation for this is not so much that these standards, such for example, the EN 5128, which is about software and railway, or the ISO 26262, which is about the area of automotive. None of these standards describe how to build a chauffeur to be, how it is to be implemented. At least for the technical aspect of the task to implement something like that, we can do just fine without the standards. But if you want to of such systems onto the ground, then lawmakers and insurance companies force us to adhere to these standards. Otherwise, we would not personally be happy anymore if such an autonomous system that we put into operation is involved in an accident. So shades of Tesla. Do you remember the discussion about the autopilot in accidents with the unrecognized truck or the unrecognized cyclist or the sleeping car driver at 150 miles per hour on the highway or something like that? So in such discussions, we come quickly to the point, who is to blame if something happens? And in order to ensure that you have done everything accordingly to the current state of science and technology to set up a functional safety system, for this, compliance with standards is very advisable or highly recommended. So, but what if these standards, if not a one-to-one description about how our new system to be developed? With regard to functional safety, such standards describe requirements which should be complied with. And these requirements are based on the respective process. So not only, but also the development process. Just like the phase operation, also known as the maintenance process, and requirements are also placed on how a system is to be taken out of service. So it's about the complete life cycle of a system. And it's then important to make the measures specified in the standard and to follow these methods specified in the standard. But one problem that we are feeling, especially when it comes to safety in AI, at the time of their publication, standards are usually no longer up to date with the current state of science and technology. So everyone is actually confronted with the same problem, namely compliance with the requirements of the applicable standards. In the current standard, however, the aspects we are currently facing with the topic of AI are not addressed at all. During the development of the currently valid EN 50128 or ISO 26262, the topic of AI was not appropriately incorporated. These versions of those standards that are valid today are in fact several years old. The same is true regarding the IEC 61508, which is generally accepted as a basic standard for functional safety. And the current version of the IEC 61508 has been valid for more than 10 years now. In the current valid version of the IEC 61508, there's actually a clause that names artificial intelligence, of course, and the table software design and development, software architecture design reads about artificial intelligence fault correction, starting from the safety integrity level, still 2 up to SIL 4, not recommended. And this reading is most often interpreted as AI is generally not allowed in IEC 61508 up to SIL 2. And this table only deals with a precisely named application, namely an error correction by AI. And in addition, not recommended is not be equated with not allowed. But as I said, it's very often misinterpreted. The fact that this is often incorrectly read as an exclusion criteria for AI in a system following 61508 is currently being discussed in the revision of the next edition of the 61508. And also discussion, should something be changed here? And if so, what should be defined in terms of requirement or measures for the use of AI? Should specific requirements for AI actually be mentioned in the safety standard at all? Because when it comes to the revision, the experts of the subject of AI are not gathered around the table, but experts on the subject of functional safety. The opportunity was therefore seized to join forces with the expert of the subject of AI and work together on the normative requirements, safety and AI. And in fact, a technical report is to be created from a cooperation between the SD42, in which the experts on the topic of AI and the maintenance group of the safety standard, and at least they joined starting on the document together. What would be the content, what should be the content of this technical report? It would be, of course, desirable if some kind of instructions were given for the use of AI, that is a description of how an AI can form part of a safe function. A system could therefore be designed in such a way that it corresponds directly to the specification from the technical report. Whether such instructions will actually be found in the technical report in the desired level of detail is currently rather less likely, but of course it remains to be seen. Also, this type of guide is actually in process. I come back to this later when it comes to the application guides 284261. But some good and useful result as an outcome for the users is only possible if there's a collaboration between the safety experts and the experts on AI. At least this is my personal opinion. Collaboration is also a good keyword when it comes to other activities about standardization in AI. German DIN and DKE are developing a standardization roadmap for AI with the aim of defining a framework for action that standardization then has to fill out. And the whole thing serves to implement the federal government's AI strategy. DIN and DKE are working together with the federal government and representatives from business and science to support international competitiveness. With this, what the federal government has explicitly set as a goal in field of action 10 with the subject of setting standards. So the first version of the standardization roadmap has been published at the Federal Government Digital Summit at 13th of November 2020, and the second one should be published this end of this year or beginning of next year. Not sure about the date for that. In order to establish the framework of action mentioned in a meaningful way, the Expert Council on AI and Individual Industrial Applications and other working groups are working on various aspects of AI. One of the sub-working groups has the title Safety, Trustworthy AI System, and a safe part in the standardization roadmap actually means functional safety, as well as security against attacks. Here on the slides, the term trustworthy appears for the first time. And it will now turn out that under trustworthiness, apparently the most important aspect when looking at AI systems is named, also from the point of view of functional safety. The AI experts from the aforementioned AISTAR2021, who work in the Joint Technical Committee of the International Organization of Standardization and the ISE, have also recognized this. And there's a working group in the AISTAR2021 that is working on a proposed draft technical report, which has an overview of trustworthiness in AI as its title. And another working group of AISTAR2021 is working on a document that deals with the second part of the AI assessment of the robustness of neural networks and the topic formal methods and methodology. And at least this is a project already approved by the AISTAR2021. Trustworthiness, robustness, all terms that are mentioned in connection with the consideration of risk when using AI under various aspects. And by the way, the term AI or artificial intelligence, that is a term that everyone likes to use, but everyone actually wants to have understood something different. The term AI is not generally clearly defined, but there will be certainly a group working on this on DKE, ESA or ISO for this unambiguous definition. This is still pending. So let's get back to the topic of the event, and that's the topic of safety. A description of functional safety for a system like it is about risk that arise from a use of a system and how to deal with this risk probably. So it's primarily about risk management. And safety does not set the goal of having a risk-free system. You just have to work towards an acceptable residual risk. And the outcome of all this will sure be incorporated or at least referenced in the upcoming technical report of functional safety in AI system. So it's slowly becoming clear from what has been said so far that it currently seems to be very little tangible or on the subject of safety in AI. Everything is still in planning and processing, just like the approved work item, or still in the very early stages of discussions, like the collaboration that has been started between experts of AI and the functional safety as a joint working group of the AISTAR2021 and the IST61508 is. But at least at the end of the lecture, I would like to mention a work under the patronage of Dean and DKE that actually provides concrete content on the subject of safety in AI. And this is about the VDE application guidance AR2842-61, Development and Trustworthiness of Autonomous Cognitive Systems. Also, this AR has not been published incomplete. The first parts of the AR rules are already prepared, whereby already is good because the working group is working since 2018 and domains like automotive, industry, health, and so on this driving a cross-domain standard for development of an autonomous cognitive system is the goal to go for. And an important aspect there, in order to avoid a lack of definition of a term AI, the working group wrote on the title Autonomous Cognitive Systems. And if you're currently talking about AI, that is actually mostly understood as AI. Machine learning, neural networks, and what all techniques are covered by that means. With autonomous cognitive, there is at least one form of area definition that is better than talking about AI in general. The complete life cycle is considered in the application guideline, so that sounds very familiar to us safety people, as our safety standard expect us to do like so. From the idea to development to maintenance up to the decommissioning. We have to have the functional safety system under control every moment in the product life cycle. The application guideline has mainly dealt with the development of the system life cycle, mainly, but not exclusively. A very important aspect, especially from the point of view of AI, is the maintenance of AI system. We currently like to see the great advantage of a cognitive system that is able to continue to improve during operation, or at least to adapt independently to changes. And this is one of the most interesting advantages of an AI system compared to a statically developed non-AI system. But since this is then means a kind of dynamic in risk management, this makes the topic of AI and functional safety so exciting. A safety would like completely analyze systems, which is almost impossible to achieve with a statically defined non-AI system in today's usual complexity, but then also to provide such a good risk management for dynamically changing systems that are proven SIL 4 is achieved and retained, a more than ambitious goal to go for. Using methods, sorry, it's too fast. So using measures and methods, as it currently stands for hardware and software in ISE 61508, that's not the right approach. Because doing it in this way for a subsystem like a neural network, the source code for the neural network would be considered. And to develop the source code accordingly to 61508, which means they have developed the source lines according to the requirements in a safe manner, this does not really make a significant contribution to the system risk assessment. How the system behaves is no longer justified in its individual source lines, but in the knowledge that the system was taught through the data when training the neural network. And even adding the individual transistor of a graphic accelerator in a safety analysis will not help us. And this is not the right way even for ASICs in the 61508, since the functionality does not correspond to the much wanted sum of the individual parts. This is why it's an extra part in the 61508 that looks at ASICs from a safety perspective, and looks like we need something like that also for the AI. So the working group for the application guideline has thought about this, and as a result, the AI is defined as a third system element, in addition to hardware and software. Admittedly, this concept is something, let's call it, it takes getting used to. But after all, in a system, we actually have only hardware and on which software can run. So what is this third system element? So the working group for the application guideline describes this through the 7 parts that together make up the application guideline. At least the examples try to describe it as best as possible. And a key to a comprehensible description is a consideration of the development from different perspectives, namely to differentiate between a solution, a system, and a technology level. And from each of these perspectives, the application guideline names procedures and gives examples to explain what activities have to take place at these levels. Here also we remember the wish that we had formulated a few slides ago about the content of the technical report, which could arise from the liaison between the SD42 and the maintenance group of the 61508. Descriptions on how an AI can form part of a safe functions are desirable. The application guideline actually talks about so-called AI blueprints, a kind of template process that describes how one of various AI methodologies can be applied. And the introduction of AI blueprints is aimed at integrating such a system element with a predefined quality level and predefined reliability requirements into a safety system, what should make the accessibility in relation to functional safety, risk consideration, and so on possible and more simple. In fact, that is not about the reinvention of the wheel. It also evident from the fact that the subject of trustworthiness is also a central importance in the application guideline. We already had a topic of trustworthiness in other activities on safety and I considered so far. So it keeps coming up, this topic of trustworthiness, the reliability of AI. And in the application guideline, this topic is specifically addressed in the solution level and with a trustworthiness analysis to be carried out at this level. And this trustworthiness analysis is not just about aspect of functional safety. In fact, it's expected that goals are also defined and evaluated in relation to other aspects, reliability, maintainability, usability, ethics, and on so on. But safety and security is also mentioned as separate aspects in the application guideline. And maybe one of the others also noticed that the German ethics council has dealt with the aspect of ethics in AI, and this has already resulted in recommendations that should be actively be considered in a trustworthiness analysis too. So ultimately, all parts have to come together to form a whole. Process audits can be used to check quality standard for the development and operations of AI systems, and assured properties of the AI system can be verified through product tests. Both audit approaches have to fit into a higher level audit framework, which also ensures the comparability of the test of different systems. This test framework should be open with regard to the selection of subsequent test procedures. However, they remain connectable and compatible for established test methods. Common criteria may be mentioned here as an example of an established test method. Whether the concept from the VDE application guideline contributes to building trust in solutions with AI as a relevant part of a functional safe system remains to be seen in the future. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and let's start the discussion together.
Yes. Thank you, Frank. We already have some questions coming in, and the first one is coming from Alexander, and he is asked, how or can AI provide practical quantitative proof similar to classic FEMECA, so failure mode, effective and criticality based analysis?
The problem with AI is that currently it's difficult to make some analysis in a system before the usage started, and this is needed for doing analysis which we need for safety. For example, we need analysis to be done way before the system is put into operation, and most of the work currently on, for example, trusted AI, explainable AI and all of that is doing some post-mortem analysis, so giving us some ideas why this is a result of this input or something like that. But yes, currently it's very difficult.
Okay, I see. Okay. And so, I mean, we actually have a comment from Professor Zicari that says that really one of the challenges of all of these proposed standards is that an AI should be monitored over time after it's deployed. So how do we take that into account?
Yeah, this is one of the things that if you talk about safety, you have to do thoughts about all of the life cycle, not only why you use the system, but even make thoughts about how to put it out of order. And of course, monitoring is needed. The problem is thinking about, for example, autonomous driving cars, doing a training of an AI, doing a testing of an AI, and then cut off the possibility for the system to learn, and then use this AI and to monitor if new training data, new test data will improve the system, and then use the new data for an update over the air or whatever. And it's not a good idea to use for an AI system, because the possibility to be an adaptive system is then no longer be possible in AI. And to do a monitoring in a live system with thousands and thousands of AIs currently learning, it's a difficult task, I think.
Yeah, this is all at once. And so, sort of like, do you have, beyond this, do you have an estimate which criteria AI will have to fulfill in order to be acceptable as a safe system?
The goal should be, if we work together, safety and AI experts, to get something like a measure we can then use for an AI to say, okay, these features during development of the AI and these features during the usage of the AI are possible to be shown on a ruler to say, okay, it's good or not good. But currently we do not have this ruler. We do not have rules to say it's acceptable for the AI quality or not. And the big problem is that for the machinery and so on, the reliability is 10 minus 19, and currently AI is about 10 minus 1 or something like that. So it's a problem to be in accuracy which safety would expect. On the other way, safety must need to move in a direction which is possible to use the AI system, because we have to.
Okay, thank you for this assessment. Okay, I think there's no more questions coming in. So, but thank you very much for this detailed overview, and it's very impressive to see what kind of standardization is really needed behind all this. I mean, so many of us think just of you see the applications we just have Professor Dengel, and we never think about all the standards we actually need to develop and need to harmonize behind the scenes, just so this actually can work across sectors or across companies even. You can imagine that the two companies might develop completely different standards. So this is really impressive to see what kind of also amount of work goes into this.
Yeah.